Alrighty, so this is my project on male and female athlete representation in media. I've got only 15 minutes according to this, and I've got quite a few slides, so I'm going to try to get through as much as I possibly can. If I don't get through it, hopefully you understand and just take a look at the rest of the slides. But there is about 59 here, so I'm going to go ahead and get going. All right, so this was the first study. This was the gender representation in 2010 NCAA Division I media guides. I've got my source up top right up here. And I do that kind of just because I literally have to have an in-text citation for every line and sentence that I use. So I didn't get any information outside. So that's kind of how I set this up. So this was really about essentially the analysis of media guides from 73 different universities that are part of the Division I BCS, the ACC, Pac-10, which is now the Pac-12, the Big 10, Big 12, Big East, and SEC. They used baseball, softball, both for basketball, golf, gymnastics, hockey, and tennis. And real quickly, a media guide is usually a recruiting tool that a lot of staffs and administrations will send out to prospective athletes. They can be used to build school spirit. They can be used to discuss things, like I said, in recruiting visits between coach and player, things like that. And so what they did was they really tried to do a gender comparison to see how male and female athletes were depicted. They did, one of them was whether they were in and out of uniform. Another one was whether they were on the field course or court of play, as opposed to kind of in on the sidelines per se, or maybe just out and about in the town or on campus. And then the last one was an active or passive pose. Active was defined as you were on the court, say dribbling a ball, or you were on a tennis court, with racket in hand, actually in a match. And then passive would be defined as you might just be posing for some type of picture, like a kind of a staged photograph or something like that. All right, there's a couple pictures. One on the left would be an example of an active. One on the right would be an example of a passive. Results really showed that for the uniform one, that 438 total athletes were in uniform. 430 of them were in uniform out of the 438 that were analyzed. And then there were 220 women and 218 men. We can see the figures there. So 98.6% were in uniform for women and 97.7% were in uniform for men. There's another picture there from the guide. All right, the next one was the field of play. So again, this was 401 total athletes were used. 241 were on the playing surface. That was a 60.1% that were actually depicted, both male and female, on the playing surface. And then there was 199 females. 56.3% of them were shown on the playing area. And in males, 64.2% were shown for them. And the last one for this study was active or passive poses. So there were 166 males that were analyzed. There were 71.7% of them were considered an active pose position, and 60.1% of the female athletes were in an active pose position at that point. All right, this is the second study. This was talking about the golfers. And really I think it started with the Casey Martin case, if I'm not mistaken. That was I think he was a Stanford educated golfer. He had a disability and he essentially sued the PGA over the fact that he couldn't use a golf cart. And the PGA came back, I think, and countered and said that they should be able to set their own rules and whatnot, and that might give him an unfair advantage. And as a result of that case, there was a lot of analysis in golfing magazines to see whether they depicted people that weren't, quote unquote, the ideal golfer, or however the study defined it. Golf for Women, Golf Digest, Magazine, Senior Golfer, and Sports Illustrated were the choices there. So there's 5 total magazines. Kind of went through that. A couple of the magazine pictures there. So what did the results show? So for disabled golfers, it was quite blurry. This chart, I had to take a screenshot because it was, I really couldn't get this chart in here another way. But needless to say, there wasn't a lot of articles on disabled players. But 4 out of the 5 magazines actually did have at least a couple of articles, which you can see the figures there. Golf for Women, I believe, was the one that actually didn't have. Yeah, it was. So Golf for Women, it was the one that didn't have the any articles about disabled players. All right, and then this is the next one, talking specifically about women golfers. Obviously, as to be expected, the Golf for Women is going to have the most women golfers, and pictures and photographs and articles and marketing. And then the rest of them had much less, obviously. We'll go to the next one. So this is finally the third study now, and this is really the gender differences in sports news coverage on Twitter. So for this study, these tweets were analyzed based on if a celebrity posted them or something like that. And then they receive media attention for them, and like sports networks, for example, if you watch NFL Network, you'll have a player that'll tweet something, and then the NFL Network will display it and discuss it and talk about it. That's essentially kind of how the study was here. They categorized it based on date, communication, sport, photo, gender represented, and for the women's tweets, they used 2 different types. They used athletes and non-athletes. Those are the days that the tweets were analyzed. So they basically pulled the tweets, analyzed them all within a 24-hour period. Results basically showed that the men were featured 96.9% of the time, while women were featured 3.18% of the time. ABC Deportes portrayed women the most at 4.84%. And if we look at the next one, ABC Deportes also used the photos along with women. They used that tactic over 95% of the time. Again, the lowest count was El País Deportes in this case, which was 60.48%. There's the actual charts. All right, so for the newspaper evaluation, I did use Idaho Statesman. I thought that'd be a good paper to use. I obtained the information through their archives, in which I actually went back and picked the opening day of the NFL to start my analysis. I was just curious in general to see how much the NFL would shadow other sports. Not that I really have an issue with that, and if I have time, I can kind of get into that later. But just was really curious to see if their athletes would be highlighted over other male athletes, as well as women athletes. So what I did was I basically looked at the paper. I went to the sports section. I read just enough of the article to get a little bit of an overview. I analyzed the location of the article, in other words, where it was placed on the page, and then picture size, location if available, and then the total length of the article is what I looked at. So here's the first one, September 10th, 2020, which was the Thursday. That was the opening day of the NFL for Thursday Night Football. And as to be expected, we see, let's go back, Kyle Shanahan for the head coach of the 49ers. And he's really just talking about his, essentially his trip to the Super Bowl after the Niners, I think, lost or have won combined, or have won less games combined. Or let's see, hold on, let me get that right. After winning 12 games total prior to 3 seasons, that's what it was. So, sorry, there's a lot of info here I'm trying to process. I'm trying to do it quickly too, so forgive me. But then there's Jimmy Johnson as well, NASCAR driver, and I know he's transitioning from NASCAR back into IndyCar. I think he's got a new obtained partnership and sponsorship with another IndyCar legend named Scott Dixon. Next one was the bottom page of the article, which was Serena Williams. And she was winning the quarterfinals in the U.S. Open against that star player. What's her name? Perankova, I think is her name. And she's a pretty amazing player as well. I estimated that article to be about 500 words. There was a pretty good sized picture of her screaming in joy on the court with a racket. So, I think that's kind of an active pose position. She probably just scored, something like that. Next one was Howie Kendrick. He's the Nationals. He's definitely a pretty good player. I think he's a designated hitter, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember. But he came off the IR after 10 days. He's battling a hamstring issue, and he's still batting 275, which is pretty impressive. And then finally, there is a golf a golf article talking about a new research facility that they're doing in Pinehurst. In regards to the Kendrick article, that was about a 250-word estimated article, pretty large pictures. I tried to put at the bottom of the page here. All right, next one was Dustin Johnson. That article was about 750 words. He was talking about the FedEx Cup. He's only won one U.S. Open, I want to say. And so I think that they were discussing, if I'm remembering correctly, his desire to win another. And then the next one, we see the high school scoreboards at the bottom. So here's 9/11. As we see this is the Friday then. This would be opening day for some high schools, maybe not. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly. I think when I played, it was late August, early September, so it's probably around that time. We see high school football. We show Caden Chan, who is a wide receiver over at Mountain View. He was basically discussing how the high school sports have been changed in terms of scheduling with COVID. There's two divisions. There's a West and an East. Probably a 350-page article, good size page or good size picture of Caden. And then at the bottom of the first page, we see DK Metcalf, who is a freak athlete and wide receiver for the Seahawks. And he's definitely a super stud. He was discussing his training. He was discussing some of his off-season preparation with Russell Wilson, where they basically quarantined together and would work out every morning at 5 a.m., running plays, running routes, lifting, sprinting, all those different things. And then the final one is it showcases the MLB's plans to host the playoffs with COVID, and the World Series is to be played in Arlington, Texas. That article is 250 words. NCAA's March Madness, that was a good size article, I think. I think it was at least over I said 350. And then the high school scoreboard was next. September 11th, that was highlighting the Braves once again. So it was highlighting Adam Duvall specifically. And then it was talking about gambling for football. Next one was NASCAR Hall of Fame. Here's September 12th, talking about the Chiefs in regards to their stadium. Also talking about college football quarterback Trevor Lawrence. 250 words, probably with that article. Next one was another 500 words. Here's another Serena Williams excerpt. Talks about Dak Prescott later on and Todd Gurley, so more NFL news. Talking about Eagle High School football. Ben Ford, which is a stud quarterback. I think he's got a scholarship for baseball actually at UW, so they're highlighting him. He was talking about Emmett High School football. Talking about the Raiders, and then it was highlighting another athlete from the Avalanche as well. 14th, talking about college football rankings. Cubs as well, and then BSU basketball assistant coach, and it kind of goes on and on. Anyway, I'm going to jump to the conclusion because I pretty much have no time left. Conclusion was really, the average article for men was about 500 words. Women was probably 350. 3 total articles on women. I counted 32 related to men and men's sports. And that's really it. I would get into this, but I don't really have time. But I was going to talk about what the data actually showed and what it didn't showed. But anyway, I don't have time for that. So hope you enjoy it.